everyone, this is Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to have some more fun with Wilton's Violet food coloring. I am not yet done with exploring how this beautiful, beautiful food coloring breaks into different colors, and I thought it would be fun to do some dip dyeing with a twist today. To start off, I'm going to get a nice, guys, I'm starting to run low on this container. Oh my. I'm really scraping it. I'll have to get another fork in a second to get some more dye out. Actually, it looks like I'm at the end. I'll just use this one. I'm using my less than scientific back of the fork method for getting dye out. Actually, why not just add some water to it, since clearly I am at the end of this container of dye. Alright, that's a lot of Wilton's Violet in the pot, so we should really have some fun today. Oh gosh. Alright, anyway, normally when I do dip dyeing, I will slowly submerge the yarn into the dye bath. But today I want to do the reverse, and I want to start by quickly putting the yarn completely into the hot dye bath and then slowly removing it. And so this way, instead of having a tip that is going from like a magenta to a light blue, maybe we'll go from, you know, a paler pink into a deep purple. But I haven't tried this before, which is why it's a dyeing experiment. But it should be fun. The yarn I'm using today is 100% Peruvian Highland wool. The base is KnitPicks worsted wool of the Andes, as part of the Bare line, so it hasn't been bleached or anything. I am pre-soaking the yarn in just plain tap water, and it has been soaking for a couple hours, but pre-soaking for 20 to 30 minutes is totally sufficient. This dye bath contains 8 cups of water, and you saw me already add a lot of Wilton's Violet food coloring, and I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of white vinegar. And mix this up. I'm going to bring this to a boil and then reduce the temperature and reduce the heat of the stove, and then add the yarn. Let's get dyeing. Alright, so as I said, my plan is to put all the yarn in really fast and then start removing. Hey, whoa, this is all really blue right away. That was not what I was expecting at all. What would you know? Maybe this is very strange. That's not what I was expecting to happen. I put it in and it turned bright blue. Alright, I would say that a lot of the red crashed out, but I did. That's funny. Maybe I've never seen this before. Well, I mean, this is going to be a really cool yarn. But this is the exact same proportion of liquid that I used the last time I dip dyed with Wilton's Violet. But, I mean, there's definitely some red. The pink bound very quickly and splotchily. I am really surprised. I might need to try this again with a new, I might need to try this again with a new batch of Wilton's Violet. I mean, this is going to be a gorgeous yarn. Don't get me wrong, but alright, I'm going to start rolling this up so I don't have to hold my arm quite so high. This is why these things are experiments. You never quite know how it's going to turn out. I mean, you can definitely see some of the particulates around the edge, which I tend to get regardless of the pH, but this did look particularly blue to me when I started. Yeah, this is not what I expected. Gorgeous yarn though. Gorgeous, gorgeous yarn. I'm nearly speechless. You know, I was expecting to see like the red strike right away, which it did, but there was far more blue in here than I had been anticipating. So I did, some red definitely crashed out. So I don't know if you can see on this paper towel. I tried to skim some off, but you can see that this is really, really, like there's not a lot of pink, which I am just not used to. Interesting. Alright, well, I think I have exhausted most of the dye. There's some left, but my arm is getting a little tired, so I'm going to turn off the heat and put this in a bowl. So bear with me one sec as I arrange this. Okay, so there's no question that we got a stunning yarn. Let me zoom out a bit. There's no question that we got a stunning yarn. And it's even like very purple. I'm just amazed that there was so much less pink than I was expecting. And maybe it is because I put in the yarn so fast and that the pink just went all over. I'm not sure. But anyway, I'm gonna let this cool, and then we will be back and wash it and do the conclusions. But man, I'm pretty surprised. Let's try with changing two parameters. I'm going to add a little less vinegar this time, and I'm also using a different batch of, brand new batch of food coloring. This time I'm only going to add 2 tablespoons of white vinegar instead of 3, even though I've routinely done 3 tablespoons with some of my other dyeing experiments. But I noticed when I was doing the dip dyeing with the black recently that I saw a lot of particles crashing out with the old Wilton's dye that had red 3 and not the new Wilton's dye with red 40. Wilton's Violet contains red 3, so I don't really know what happened. But let's take a healthy forkful of dye, add it to the pot. That's interesting. That does not seem very dark. Oh, I think the dye is like on the bottom. I'm gonna see it clumped down there. That is also new to have the dye. I got like a full-on clump of dye It's just kind of, I don't know if you can really see, but it's just sitting at the bottom of the pot. Hopefully it'll dissolve as I bring things to a boil. So there are a few things that could have contributed to the results that I got last time that were puzzling. Since I was at the end of this dye, I rinsed it out in the water itself, so I could have just had, more dye than normal. And that could have, well, you wouldn't think that that would necessarily skew the results. This is really, I don't think I'm on camera. This is like really clumpy. Need to like stir this up. Maybe this is not a very good batch. I don't know, but I'm gonna add some more dye. Hope that these clumps at the bottom get dissolved. And I'm gonna heat this up to a low boil. And then we'll reduce the heat and we will try dip dyeing this fiber again. As we're approaching a boil, or actually just starting to boil right now, you can see that there are some particulates on the surface. But I'm not seeing some against the edge of the pot quite yet, which, and again, it could be the length of the age of the dye, or this could be because I've used less vinegar. And there's another variable that I forgot about. I'm using a different pot than I was in the last one, but we will see what we get. All right, I'm gonna reduce the heat a bit, and remember my goal here is to add the yarn to the pot as quickly as possible and then start removing it. So we'll see. Already, okay, I'm seeing, oh no, I dropped the whole thing. Well, not quite fast enough necessarily, because you can see we've already got some highly visible breaking, but we are seeing a lot more pink than we did the last time. So I'm gonna put this all back in for a minute. Interesting though. I guess the red is striking so fast that it's pretty much done by the time I have added all the fiber to the pot. So we'll be getting some speckled color around all of it, but we definitely got a lot more pink this time though. So I think if you want a more even gradient, adding the yarn to the pot really slowly, a little bit at a time, is the way to go. What we're getting right now is really cool, and is like really fun, broken violet, but I'm not quite achieving the gradient that I had hoped for. It's still a really pretty yarn though. And you can see I'm using kitchen tongs, dripping the whole thing back in for a minute, letting some more blue, a bit more blue absorb to the top. And so you're starting, if you look around the pot, you can start to see some particulates. And I'm inclined to think that my problem was not the concentration of vinegar in the last time, but it was more because I've used this proportion of water and vinegar for dip dyeing before, but I think that the issue might have been the age of the dye. But you can certainly start with even less vinegar, get the pink onto the yarn, and then, okay, I'm now gonna just put this whole thing in. You can add more vinegar, or start with less vinegar, even 1 tablespoon. Let the pink strike to the fiber really, really quickly, and then you can add more vinegar to help the blue bind. And so, yeah, maybe we'll try sometime with significantly less vinegar to give some time for the pink to spread more. But you can just see how immediately, before I had finished adding the yarn to the pot, we had already exhausted the pink from this yarn. But nevertheless, the colors are absolutely gorgeous. But I'm just, you know, we have exhausted most of the dye. There's still some blue left, but most of the dye is in the yarn. So I'm going to go ahead and add this. Remove it and add it to messily, because I picked it up a lot, to this bowl. So you can see we've got some really pretty yarn, but we definitely got a lot more pink, I think, in this instance. But yeah, so now I'm going to let this cool to room temperature, and then I will be back to wash the yarn. Now that the fiber has cooled, we will wash it using some lukewarm water, and I like to use just whatever dish soap I have on hand. And I add a little to the water. You don't want to agitate it too much because you don't want to risk felting. But, okay, and we can see that some color is definitely coming out of the fiber. Probably because there's some of those particulates that we saw in the water bath all over it. And so we'll continue rinsing and maybe adding more soap as necessary until the water runs clear, and then we will hang up the yarn to dry. I was initially unsure if this would be 1 video or 2, so that's why some of my references to the other video in some of this happened. But I think that combining this in 1 video shows some very important things. When I started this project, I envisioned doing a reverse dip dyeing with Wilton's Violet, and where we started by having the yarn completely submerged in the food coloring and slowly removing it, so that way maybe some of the red would be distributed all over and we would get a slightly different gradient from what I'd seen before. Well, I forgot just how fast the red strikes. And so in neither case was I able to add the yarn fast enough, so that way when the one end of the yarn made it in, it was already blue. So in both of these circumstances, I had run out of the red by the time we got to the end. This first skein that I dyed actually came out a lot purpler than I had expected, and I saw a lot less of the pink. And it looked like a lot of the dye had crashed out. So I dyed a second skein using less vinegar, and ultimately, when you compare them, I think that there was less dye in here as well, but we did get a lot more pink. And we saw a lot less dye crash out. This is also from a new container of Wilton's Violet food coloring. So in my observations, this didn't really work as I had intended. In both cases, I have beautiful, beautiful yarns, but I didn't get kind of a reverse gradient that I was going for. In this case, we do still have a bit of a gradient, and it is a beautiful yarn with deep saturated colors. But you can see that even though, you know, I added the yarn as quickly as I could, the more pink patches, it's still very patchy versus having a consistent gradient in any respect. And the same thing you can see over here. I tried to add the yarn as fast as possible, and while you know there is more pink in certain areas, by the time we got to an end, we were already, before I had added the yarn completely, all of the red had just already been sucked up into the yarn, which means that, you know, this, you know, was it a failure? No, but we got something a little different from what we had expected. So now I have added in a yarn that I created with the more classic dip dyeing, where I started adding this end to the pot, and then I slowly added more and more yarn, giving us this gradient from purple to like a middle blue to a lighter blue at the top. And so I think what I was initially hoping was that I could have this pink more distributed, and then I would get a gradient of the blue slowly, and so that I would go from a brighter magenta to, you know, with more and more blue to a purple, but the red struck too fast. So, but comparing this to the previous video where I dip dyed in black, and with the formulations that had red number 40 versus red number 3, and where we saw a more consistent gradient, you can see here that there's a lot of splotchiness in where the red added. And so the gradient is has more variation to it. And I think that this is one of the things that makes Wilton Violet so fun, that it breaks so much. And that makes it really fun to play with. And I'm not done playing with it, and I'm not done being completely surprised with the results of my dyeing experiments. I think that I want to remember to add more dye. I really like the deeper depth of color that we see in this first skein versus the second. And you know, I think that I could do better at measuring the amount of dye that we added, but since we were near the end of the container here, that's why I just kind of like, you know, rinsed out the whole container, which brought the measurements down. But I think that the joy and the surprise of what you get from doing things a little more qualitatively versus quantitatively is kind of fun. Make sure you subscribe to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel. Sometimes I go live and then you get notified, and so you might catch me live and be able to ask some questions, and you'll also get notifications when I add new videos. I really appreciate all of your support, and for more dyeing experiments and other fun crafts, make sure you check out www.chemknits.com. Thanks for watching, and happy dyeing!